Okay, so welcome to our next book club, which was organized by the Theatre Southeast Asia. And our guest today is Helen Ellis. And the book she brought to us, it's Being a Distance Grandparent. I think it will be a very interesting conversation today. And feel free to ask whenever you feel like, and just put your question into the chat box. Before we start, just the agenda, what's going to happen today. And it's been recorded, so feel free to switch your camera off if you don't feel comfortable with recording. You can go. Next slide, please, Stagey. Okay, just a few words about the Theatre Southeast Asia. Our members here today, Maria Teresa and myself, Edith, we will be asking Helen about her book. Then we have Seiji, who's always helping us with the technical issues, and that gives us a very good feeling that we don't have to do that. And we have Artie, who will be helping us as well. Joyce, he's not here today, but she has a very interesting special message to us, so that will be showed in a few minutes. And Gregory and Shrivin, who were not able to take part today, but they will be here for the next sessions. And some values about the theater Southeast Asia is the openness, tolerance, diversity, and inclusion. And just a few words about our mission. So let's see what's going to happen today. Next slide, please. So here's Helen with us and her book, and I have her book as well, which is very nice. And soon we will asking her about how this book just came alive. And now we can show the message from Joyce.
Okay, one moment, please.
Thank you.
Can everyone see my screen, the video? Yeah.
Hello and welcome to this CETAR Southeast Asia session on the very important topic of distance grandparenting with the author Helen Ellis, a topic which is very dear to my own heart. As you can see from this picture, I am a proud new grandparent. I'm in the fortunate position of having been able to travel from my home in Singapore to the Gulf Coast of the United States, where my daughter and her husband live and have just in the last 3 weeks given birth to this beautiful baby grandson, baby Henry. And as I say, I'm very fortunate to be able to make it here and to be able to spend time with my first grandchild. And I'm not so much looking forward to doing this on a distance basis. So I'm looking forward to hear Helen's tips on how that can be managed. I think this is a topic which will be relevant and important to many of us who, through our work and lives, have found ourselves with family members separated by great distances in different parts of the world, and how we maintain those connections with them. It's something that I've experienced throughout my own life. I grew up with my parents living in countries such as Thailand, Pakistan, India. And in those days when we didn't have such great virtual communications, we relied very much on post and making visits to family maybe every 2 years. So one of my many happy memories of my grandparents, who were living back in Scotland, was receiving post letters My grandmother always used to send us comics with sweets wrapped up in the comics, and we would drive down to the local post office in the town where we lived near Chiang Mai in Thailand and collect those comics. And that was always a great connection. And then, of course, we always enjoyed visits back every 2 years. We knew that that was the time that we would be able to go back for our so-called home leave and spend some time with family back in our own country, and then go back to where my parents were living and working. Then when I grew up myself and had children and moved overseas with them, we also tried to maintain connections with grandparents. Again, not quite the fantastic virtual communication possibilities, but we did have occasional phone calls, and travel was becoming a little bit easier by then. So we often had my parents and my mother-in-law would come and visit and stay with us in the different countries that we were living in to spend time with the grandchildren, and we would also spend time back there with them. So we had good connections, both in person and also through post and other means. But I know that some of the difficulties of the last 18 months, particularly with the COVID pandemic, that many people have had problems maintaining those connections, particularly in-person connections, but we have had the advantages of Zoom and other virtual communications. And I know that Helen probably has some great tips, which I'm sure she will share with you. So I wish you all the best for this session, and look forward to hearing her advice and stories, and also maybe hearing some from you as well on how we can keep up those distance family connections when we are separated by the miles, that we can still maintain relationships. So have a good session, and hope to see you again soon.
I think that was a great introduction by Joyce, and give us a direction to this session today. And I think the topic is close to our hearts. Many of us have experience about transnational, being a transnational family members, or having a distance families. For me, it's like being a psychologist does not mean that I can apply all the theories into practice in my life, or that I can look at my family as an outsider. Helen's book, however, gave me immediately another perspective, which helped me to understand my family and its dynamic much better. Living a transnational life, as many of us do, not only determines our work-related choices, but also affects our family life. So while we focus on how to achieve better results in our job and careers, we often tend to forget that the key to our success depends not only on our performance at work, but also on how much time and attention we pay to our family. This is especially true for families where, as a result of work and career, an entire family moves to another country. What happens to the families left behind? What happens with those families that have their roots in numerous countries? Is it possible to manage a family well in this distance? And if so, how? So today we will be discussing these questions with Helen Ellis, the author of Being a Distance Grandparent. Helen is a New Zealand researcher, author, anthropologist, veteran of distance grandparenting, and the founder of distancefamilies.com. 3 of her 4 children and 4 of her 6 grandchildren live 60 to 30 flight hours away in America and England. In her research, she asked the question, how is distance grandparenting for you? Her book, Being a Distance Grandparent, a book for all generations, combines that experience with her extensive global research. This is the first of a 3-book series about distance families, each publication focusing on a different generation. Her goal is to support each generation to understand how it is for the others. As always, this session is interactive, so you are welcome to share your thoughts, your perspective, and ask questions. please put your questions into the chat box so we can follow them up. And now, very welcome, Helen Ellis.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity, and I really appreciate the interest that you've taken in my book. It's just really special, so thank you.
So Helen, can we ask you how you got this idea of the book, how it all started?
Okay, well, I've been married for over 30 years, and it's a second marriage, and my husband is older than me. So I started on the journey of being a distant step parent and step grandparent pretty early in the pace, the way things work out compared to most people. So I've been doing it for over 20 years. I have a 22-year-old granddaughter in the UK. And so I've been doing it for a long time. And this was just part of our life. It was just what happened. And then my kids grew up and they left home as well. And so then I've had been in business for years, done all sorts of things. And at one stage I decided to take a bit of a break, and I took myself off to university. When I left school, you just left school, got a job, and that's what I did. So I thought, oh, well, my kids have all got double degrees and whatever. I'm sure I could manage to do that. So I was a mature student. I did an undergraduate degree, majored in social anthropology because that seemed to be my happy place. And towards the end of my degree, I did a paper that was teaching me how to do a research proposal. And my professor said to me, Helen, now imagine you were doing your master's. What would you do it on? What would you do your research on? Well, I had no idea really. And so I suggested, if I had to do something, what about distance grandparenting? And she said, that's a fantastic idea. So from that, I'm going, masters, don't know about that. But anyway, I did a little bit of research and found that there was next to nothing. And it's a prolific social phenomenon. So it's just ridiculous. And I found that nobody in New Zealand, no academic in New Zealand has ever written anything. And there are no official statistics, but the one I've found, and it makes sense, is that 23% of New Zealand distance grandparents are distance grandparents. That's a huge proportion of our population. And allowing for the fact that our country sits in its own time zone, every single distance grandchild is in a different time zone. So I decided to do my master's because I felt somewhere somebody needed to tell the story. And then from that led to, as part of it, I started to research what books were out there in the mainstream market, and there was next to nothing. And they were old, and I had to search them through globally from old, secondhand shops and funny little towns in America. I managed to find them. So by the time I got this very small bundle, 4 or 5, most of them really out of date, half the books were about how to connect to the internet, I thought, there's this big gap. And I've only wanted to give distance families a voice. So then I decided to write the book, Being a Distance Grandparent, based on my research and other extended research. And that was when I realized that I was only telling 1/3 of the story. I was only saying how it is from my perspective. And I started to realize how important it would be, how valuable it would be for the distant sons and daughters. That's what I call you mainly, who are the middle generation, how so that we could understand how it is for you, and then the same for the grandchildren. So how is it for everybody? So my big humongous goal is, I really hope all generations will read the 3 books, because then you start to appreciate how it is for the other, and that generates empathy. So that's my big humongous goal from one class at university that said, what would you do for your master's? So it sort of escalated to answer your question.
Yeah, it's very nice. But the idea of the book was just doing research or giving tips or helping grandparents? What was the idea?
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't want to produce a cutesy little handbook. I wanted to produce something that was meaty and would help people. So I can remember having discussions with my editor, and she's saying, this is a how-to book. And I'm saying, no, it isn't. It's a how it is book. because my theory was that when everybody can figure out how it is, they are then in a space of clarity to figure out how to do. So in fairness, my book is in the end a bit of a mixture about how it is, because inevitably you start to see things, gosh, you know, if we just tweaked it here, tweaked it there, and I offered this hint or tip, it would make a difference. So it has turned into a combination, but my goal was to say how it is, because if you've got if you're trying to do distance families and you're in a mad and you're upset and you're emotional, then how can you ever get creative to improve those relationships if you're still back there feeling mad or angry or sad or emotional? So that's how I felt it would be better for everybody to have a greater appreciation, and then they can get in the creative zone. Yeah.
All right. What would you say is the hardest thing as a distant grandparent? What is the toughest?
The toughest thing is no hugs. And I can tell you that there was, with the launch of my book, well, that's what I would have said, but with the launch of my book, there was a competition on a seniors chat website here, and they were going to give a couple of books away. And they said everybody had to enter the competition, and the competition said, what do you miss the most? It was all at distance grandparents. And I got a set of the responses, and 95% said, I miss the hugs. I miss the physical contact. Yes.
Yeah, I think we, all generations nowadays have this
Yes.
feeling of missing a lot of physical contact and physical presence and so on and so forth. And we tend to underestimate the importance of that. We say, oh, we can communicate, in business they say, well, we don't need to meet anymore because we can communicate and we can work from a distance. So this is one of the things I think that is, doesn't have to be hugs in the office, but the physical contact and having the people in presence is certainly important. There was one thing that struck me in your book is the fact of, you say you have to be seen. And can you tell us a bit more about this concept of being seen?
It is a concept that is relevant to some grandparents, but not all. Some of them will say to you, well, they will say to their daughter or son or daughter-in-law, do the kids remember me? Do the children talk about me? Do they ask about Nana? Do they remember me? You secretly hope that they wake up every morning and go, oh, I wish I could chat to grandma this morning. No, they don't. They just want their cornflakes, really, But some parents, some grandparents, do have that feeling of, that they just want to know that they're thought of and they haven't been forgotten about. And they aren't. The kids don't forget them. And once you've had they're past that sort of toddler age, 15 months sort of getting on to, they remember you absolutely, and you pick up where you were next time you catch up with them because you've had all the videos in the meantime. But there's certain personalities within grandparents that kind of worry about that, but they don't need to, because the children don't forget us. No.
Yeah. But then who is responsible for keeping in touch? Is it the grandparents? Is it the parents, not the children, obviously?
I tell the middle generation, the parents of those grandchildren, that it is their responsibility to initiate the greater proportion of communication. My line is, you cannot ring a 2-year-old. So they're the ones with the busiest routines. They're the ones with children having naps and sleeps and daycare and running jobs. And especially right now with lockdown, I mean, it's just a living nightmare. And I really appreciate that. So it's much better if they take control and become what I call a booker. Book it, figure out that Sunday night after dinner is a pretty good time if you have an early dinner and get the kids sorted and 6 o'clock or whatever works out well for mum and dad, well, then book it. And the parents will be there. They'll get up, they'll get dressed, they'll, cancel that lunch with their friends or whatever it is that's in that time zone that might have been clashing. And they will be there and they will be ready. But the parents, grandparents are hesitant most of them are hesitant to just dial up all the time, because they know kids are kids. You've got to get them in the right mood. And even when you've got it all poised, 6 o'clock on a Sunday night and everyone's fed and everyone's happy, they can still be ratty and I don't want to talk to Nana. No, I don't want to talk to Nana. And they walk off and that's it, So the main responsibility needs to lie with that middle generation. They need to take that responsibility, and then they can make it work for them. They can look at the timetable, they can look at the diary, they can look at their calendar and work out what works right and book it in advance. We have a standing arrangement with one of our children, and every fourth Sunday morning at 8:30 we get an hour and a half of her, and in between that there's lots of little things, but we know. So we don't go out to breakfast that Sunday morning with friends, and we know exactly what's happening that Sunday. So yeah.
Talking about food, and it was nice how Joyce told us about the story that her grandparents were sending comics with sweets in them and things like that. And I think this is also one of the things that you stress, is the importance of food and also rituals, the kind of ritual, like you just said, meeting on the Sunday morning. And this, how do you manage this when you're a distant grandparent? I mean, for example, in Belgium, where I'm from, there's this tradition of having a family lunch every Sunday, where grandparents and parents and children meet, very family minded. And how do you manage that kind of ritual if you're in many different time zones? And do you ever manage to get together all your children and grandchildren, or do you take them at different moments?
No. Well, no, we have never ever had all our family in the one place. The last time our 4 children were together, it was in 2009 for one meal. Because they all lead such separate lives, and they are step brothers and sisters. So there's a little bit of disjoint there as well with their ages. So no, and we have our 2 grandchildren in the UK have never been to New Zealand, and they're 19 and 22. That is very unusual as well, to be perfectly honest. So we don't have an awful lot of rituals that we maintain via video, because it's just tricky, really. It doesn't work, to be perfectly honest. But we certainly do when we're there in person. There are food items that are must-be's in the suitcases, certain sweets, confectionery that we take to the UK. I took it in my book about fruit cake. Those of you with an English background or heritage will appreciate that fruit cake is a very English thing, and it's the only thing I bake. I'm not a baker, but I do. And my grandchildren in the States, I would take it over there. We took it for Christmas once. It got put out for Santa with a glass of port. And one time a friend of my daughter's came down here and called on us, and they were going back to the States, and they said, we can take anything back. I said, are you sure? Have you got enough luggage? So I gave her a block of fruitcake that was in the freezer and put it in some Tupperware. She took it home. It was only, 6 inches square. The kids went ape about it. They wanted that taste, and it's the taste, reminds you of an occasion and reminds you of being somewhere. So I think the best we can do, and now while we can't get in a plane, I mean, we haven't seen our children for 3 years, so we're really locked away here. So, if they're really lucky, they might get some fruitcake in the mail, and that's expensive. Here, we can't spend thousands on an airfare, so we might do that. So those little things, the confectionery, the baking, the special meals, the recipes. Occasionally I've been asked, what was the recipe for something? And I'll send it across. And it just transports you. The smell will transport you back to somewhere or other. So I don't personally do it by video. Depending on the time zone, you know, if you have a time zone that's very close, you can definitely sit down for a special meal and put the laptop on the table, you know, have a place setting for the family, and you can chat. And definitely, you know, people will do that quite often, but it doesn't really work for us. I mean, we're in our pajamas having breakfast and they're having their dinner, and it's a little bit crazy, really. So we've tried, we have tried having meals, but I did it once with my granddaughter when she was in Scotland, and but you know, she's munching on cornflakes and we're having a glass of red wine with some roast lamb, and you know, didn't really feel right. It doesn't work. And you know what we were talking about just before we started about where's your head? Where's your head? You know, when you've got cornflakes in your pajamas, it's in a different place from when you're having a glass of red wine and a beautiful meal. So that's kind of, it's sort of disjointed. So we have accepted over the years that there is only so much we can manage.
But now with the corona and all these things, as you said, people haven't been able to travel and see their family. Joyce nearly missed going to the US, and although she was very much looking forward to that and hoping she'd be able to get there. I have a colleague, his children are 4 and 6. They haven't seen their grandparents for 2 years. And at that age, it's a long time. And you know, you wonder how this would impact the children in a way. If they miss, you know, the meeting, yeah, of course you can chat online, etc. But meeting and the hugs and the feelings and spending some time together. It's not the same thing when you have them, when you're near, when you can visit. So
that's exactly right. It is exactly right. And, you know, we've here and down under, when I'm talking about New Zealand, where I am, Australia, probably South Africa, we're all pretty locked away from the world. You know, we can't go anywhere. You know, we're locked in, and it's incredibly hard to get for anyone to come here right now. So, you know, seeing the children is, I'm just a great believer that we'll just pick up where we left off. You know how you have an old friend that, you know, you knew from decades ago, and then you catch up every so often, and it just seems like, you know, you just pick up from where you are. And I'm just taking the attitude that that's exactly how it is. I'm not sure that the boys, my younger grandsons in the States, would instantaneously recognize me at the airport. But however, if they were taken out and going, well, Nana and Granddad are arriving today, they'd be working pretty hard to figure out who I was when I came through the arrivals hall. And so I'm convinced that we'll just pick up from wherever we have, because that's worked in the past. For example, you know, the grandchildren that are in the UK, who are now 19 and 22, you know, we would go there every couple of years, which was pretty good going when you've got 2 businesses you're running, and I had teenagers at home at that stage with my children. And we just picked up, you know, as soon as we arrived, and it was, hello, you know, big hugs, and boom, we're just straight back into it. So for those that are used to getting together more often, because maybe your employment package allows for travel once every 6 months or whatever, and that's what you're used to, then the gap that you've had right now is really big. But for those of us that are a bit further away, we're used to these bigger gaps. And I can assure you that you just pick it up, you know, it's.
Yeah, well, yes, with teenagers or adults, I would understand. But what about children?
Yes.
If they haven't seen you for 2 years.
Yes, no, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, honestly, I mean, they're 6 months, obviously they don't. But once they get to the stage of being 2, 3, you know, my oldest one in the States remembers being here as a 15-month-old, but it's more, I think, from looking at photos. But no, they do. We went every couple of years to the UK from when they were babies and toddlers, and they always remembered who we were, because we were talking in between. There was lots of communication in between. Yeah.
And there's something also that was very important, I think, in what you mentioned in your book, is this one-on-one time. when you meet, create this not just meeting with everybody and all together, but this one-on-one time. What
Yes,
is
the
that
one-on-ones,
mean?
yes, not it's in two situations, one-on-ones with the digital communication and one-on-ones when you're there. So I'm really, when you have video conversations, the temptation is to have the whole family there. Everyone catches and kids are walking by and someone's sitting on the couch and, and that's great. But the best, what the grandparents and the parents absolutely adore, is getting each of them one-on-one. So I'll take you back to a situation here with I have two granddaughters here, and I have been a nana to them since they were a baby, and now they're also 19 and 22. And I would do lots of picking up and dropping off, from school or daycare, and, messages here, messages there. So we'd have all these conversations in the car. And I loved the conversations in the car. And we weren't looking at each other because we're side by side, or maybe they were in a back seat in a car seat, actually. But you talk about things one-on-one that you never talk about at a family table or in a group video call. I talk about things that, they don't actually talk about much when their mum and dad are around. And so that's what you achieve in the one-on-one communication, whether it's via video or whether it's one in person. And
you organize this, so you have some time slots for each of them, or how do you organize?
I have had nothing formal. It's always just, you make an arrangement. Yeah. But through the writing of my book and through the research, what I am encouraging the distant sons and daughters, the middle generation, to do is, if you've got a child 6, 7, 8 or whatever and older who's quite capable of managing their devices, they are also very capable of taking on the responsibility that they talk to their grandparents once a month or whatever, and take the attitude that this is what our family does. So it's not all up to mum and dad to do the communications. They tell the children, you have a job. You have a job that to talk to Nana and Granddad once a month. You figure it out, you organize it, you sit in your room, and I can tell you those grandparents will be sitting there with, so excited to have that grandchild all to themselves. And there is an issue sometimes that they don't quite know what to talk about. But that just takes a little bit of research, maybe a few questions on the side, and, they can find lots of things to talk about. And once again, like my journey in the car, talk about things that you never talk about even when you arrive in a plane. So I think there's a huge value, because that's really where you build your relationships. And yeah, my daughter in the States is divorced, so she's co-parenting 50% of the time. There are loads of sad things about that, but one of the positive things is that every second weekend she has no children. So when she gives us an hour and a half on a Sunday morning once a month, it's child free. It's a gift, because her children are 5 and 6, so if they're running around, you don't get much great conversation. So I treasure that time slot. That's great. I'll make little notes, I must talk to her about this, and she does the same.
Judith, can we ask you actually to come in, because you have a child and his grandparents are in all over the world as well, in different places. So have you learned anything from the book that you can use, or that you will change your behavior, or towards his grandparents?
Yeah.
Sorry for what? I'm sorry, I'm just confused about that one. How could you say it again? I'm just confused as to which direction I'm going.
Yeah, that you did. I'm
I thought you did. Judith. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
My apologies, Judith.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I think that was very useful for me to read this book, because even though that I'm looking for understanding the different perspective and others' views, it doesn't mean that I can apply that easily in my life. So what's happened with me going through on the book, it was always just clicking in my head that, okay, this is the different perspective. This is how they can leave the situation. This is the thoughts that they might have, but they are not communicated with us or with me, because that's hard to communicate. So I think it's the book is giving the voice to the grandparents on a way that they might be not able to communicate on the same way to us directly. So that's why I feel it very useful, and it makes me think about how they can live the same situation from the other side of the world, and from the other. Sorry.
Do you have an example of what changed in your behavior or because of the book?
In my behavior, I don't know whether it's really changed or not, but for sure I acknowledged the thing that it must be hard for my mom as well, and it's not her job to accept all the situation, even if she's trying hardly and she's really the one who wants to be there, who wants to support us, but it might be hard in certain moments even for her. So without asking her that, okay, mom, how do you feel about that, or really giving the voice to her, it's just going forward, and we all keep our situation or our places on the same way. So it's one side, and from the other side it's like my son, how he can really keep contact, or just like stepping back and giving time for them. It's not because I always want to be there, but it's so obvious that we are always together, and understanding the importance of giving time to them, that, okay, this is your secret time now, you can use it, you can communicate, because my son is 7 now, so he's able to do that, and that gives this precious moment for them. And I didn't think about it, how much could it be important, so I didn't step back before. So changing behavior in this way, yes, I did. Changing behavior on the way, like how to communicate to my mom and how to accept her hard or difficult moments, I think it's changed as well.
Yeah. Helen, there is actually one thing I'm a bit hesitant about asking is, are there also any advantages of being a distant grandparent?
Yes, there are. Yes, I'll be quite honest that there are some terrific advantages if you choose to see them that way. First of all, I don't think I would be sitting here having done what I've done if I had grandchildren that needed to be looked after all the time. And the obligations on contemporary grandmothers to look after their grandchildren while they're, the children, the middle generation go out to work, seems to have become quite a social norm. And, it wasn't the case in my day. I never had any, never occurred to me, wouldn't, but this is sort of imposed now, and they kind of assume that you're going to do it. So I don't have any of that. And, our diary is our own, our calendar is our own. We don't have to do any babysitting. We have done it in the past because, of course, I've got grandchildren here, but I started really early. So my children were only teenagers. So I literally had babies, nappies, and teenagers at the same time. But that's just because of the age difference of myself and my husband and our children. So I've done all that. I've done that and ticked it off. But no, absolutely. And, it's really surprised me when I interviewed people. There was one couple, I'll never forget it. It was right at the start of my, university research and my, qualitative meeting appointments, and so I sat there at the kitchen table and I asked the research question. So I'm asking you the question, how is distance grandparenting for you? And they sat there and they said, fantastic, no complaints here, we're fine. I'm going, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. So, but, most people are not like that. But, they've taken the attitude, look, we've raised our kids. We said to them, go for it, take on the world, you dream big, and that's exactly what they've done. So our job is to get on and make a life, and they do. They're in all sorts of clubs, all sorts of activities, and they still get in the plane and go and do things. They've been on rescue missions and done all sorts of things at different times, but the rest of the time's their own. So yes, I like it. I like the fact that I don't have any car seats in the back of my car, because I find them very troublesome. And, you know, all those different strollers that are so tricky to put up and put down, and my back's better, I'm sure. So, you know, and the house is generally reasonably tidy. And those are things that you kind of get used to actually. So yeah, and I'm delighted that I've been able to take this on. So I miss my kids. I want to be with them, but I'm not pining. I'm getting on and making the most of it. But I do appreciate that not everybody is quite in the same mindset. Yeah.
Most grandparents would say that it's nice to have them, but it's nice also to see them go and
yes,
go home again. And you know,
yeah, but that's when you know that they just live 10 minutes down the road. So yeah, that's right.
All right. There's one thing that struck me, because your grandchildren are all in English-speaking countries, and their parents are. There's all one language. The Anglo-Saxon world, culture, language. But I'm thinking, for example, of Judith and many other grandparents who have children who have, or yourself, like Judith, your husband has a different language, the parents have a different language. So did you have any of those interviews as well about this difficulty of communicating, of the languages, of differences in languages or cultures, by the way? Oh,
there's many situations like this. Not so much with my master's research, because that was based on New Zealand grandparents, and they all, no, they didn't actually. They didn't all have English speaking. There were other languages. One had a German family. Their son was living in Germany, and they don't speak German themselves. And amongst their grandchildren, some of them were kind of English friendly, and some weren't particularly. They didn't really want to make an effort and speak in English. And so those are, you know, if the grandparents and the grandchildren speak it really, most of the time speak another language, you know, you just can't, you can't compare that relationship, because they really have very little, you know, they're just this funny person, to be honest. But I can say that even though we all speak English within my own family, there's still some real differences cultural, because my daughter married an American/Irishman, my son's married an American, my stepson's married an English girl, and my stepdaughter married a Scotsman. So we've got the whole gambit, you know, and I've had lots of occasions where I've been, I haven't quite said the right thing, or, you know, cultural oddballs. When I go to Atlanta and visit my daughter, I'm introduced as Miss Helen everywhere. And at first I found that really strange, but that is the Southern way, the Southern hospitality of Miss Helen, Mr. Clive. And I quite like that now, you know, that's kind of nice, but it was hard. But then when we had her wedding here and we had a fruit cake for the wedding, it is very traditional to give a piece of cake to the guests who couldn't come. So I, you know, went around all the special cake shops and got these little tins that you put it in. It's very traditional. Wrapped them up in some beautiful local Maori packaging, took them over to the States, and they went, fruitcake is no. It was a very odd thing, you know. I know. Yeah. And then when our son-in-law, American son-in-law, turned up to New Zealand the first time, you know, he was calling my husband sir, and sir went, oh, forget that, you know, there's no sirs around here, you know. And, you know, there's been different things about money, obligations on the grandparents for money, different obligations, you know, cultures about who buys what and how, you know, how grandparents might be involved. And we've had a few tricky things to navigate there that we've had to, it's not quite how we think about it, you know. So, so even when you're English speaking, you know, there are definitely differences, but without a doubt, if you're not speaking the same language, forget it, you know, it's really going to be very disjointed. Yeah.
As we are a very small group anyway, anybody who has a question or would like to jump in, please do. Artie, I think you would like to ask a question, or go ahead.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Mary. Yeah, I just thought, you know, why
Oops, your
topic of languages, it's been very interesting. Yeah, so I just thought, you know, you know, in your profile, you know, there was mention of you having done anthropology. And so I was wondering, you know, through that lens, is it different for, you know, different cultures, you know, the whole experience of grandparenting, you know, across the generations? Because, you know, I mean, you did mention that there are specific differences, right, in your own family, etc. But given, you know, how different cultures have different expectations, societal expectations, all of that, I was wondering if you know, had any experience of people sharing some of those perspectives.
Yes. Now, I need to sort of say from the outset that most of my book writing and most of the people I've interviewed have generally been Western people, because to be perfectly honest, I felt that the subject was so vast that I needed to narrow it down and do what I knew, you know. But along the way, obviously you end up by chatting and reading and catching up with different people. So for sure, there are different expectations about what the grandparents would expect to do or not do if they say visited. You know, some of them, they would say, well, I'm not going all that way to babysit. While others kind of what I'd call more hands-on, and definitely New Zealanders are part of that. When we go, it is no holiday. All I do seem to do is cook and clean and do dishes and washing, and that is my holiday. I'm not complaining, but you know, so there's definitely different expectations in that way. Different expectations about education and traditions. You know, you went to that university, so your child should go to that university. And this is very, in the whole TCK world, you know, to be told that they must go to a university back in England or back in America when they've never spent any time there, as we all know, is really hard. So that is that's where the generational thing starts to affect. For sure. And then there are financial things along the way. And there can be differences between the in-laws and the parents. You know, there's different cultures within that, and that makes a difference as well. Every combination of distance family has its own little quirky things. Yeah. And and we're not sort of raised, those of us who live back in our monocultural country like I do, we're not around it enough to be aware. Those of you, you know, sitting in Singapore and Hong Kong and leading your global life are just naturally more global aware and more culturally aware and more culturally empathetic. And it is harder for those of us back in the monocultural world to actually really think about it, you know, because we're not challenged in that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have I answered your question? So, yeah.
I think that you meant that, you know, every family itself is different, right? So
yes.
Yeah. Fine. Yeah. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And you know what is also different? There's a huge amount of difference if, you know, if it's the in-laws, you know, if it's your son who's overseas or your daughter who's overseas, is the daughter-in-law thing, the son-in-law thing, that has huge ramifications. You know, we all know, you know, if you talk to, you know, the mothers of the groom, you know, I have a friend who talks about being mother of the groom, you know, wear beige and say nothing at the wedding, you know. You know, you just don't put yourself out there. So there's a totally different relationship. You know, we have 3 kids overseas, and, you know, we have treated, they're all quite different to deal with because, you know, there are one's blood, or it's the daughter-in-law, the son-in-law, that kind of scenario. So that's massive and huge. Yeah.
Mhm.
I have a
Yeah,
question as well.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So going through on your research, I know what I have learned from your book, but I'm curious, have you learned something during your research? Did you get a different perspective from the others?
A different perspective from those I interviewed, or did I change with it? Is that what you mean?
Both.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yes. Through that process, what have you
Yes.
learned?
Oh, I definitely became so much more aware of little things that were happening within our family. And that's what led me to wanting to write the other books, because I started to realize, hang on, Helen, there's just not the way that you think. There's these other ways. And there were certain occasions that impacted me. I remember when we had the terrorist shootings in Christchurch, which you will remember was off the planet. You know, we didn't have things like that in New Zealand. And that was when I was just starting to do my master's, and I hadn't really decided exactly about the books at that stage. They were not quite there. But I remember my son in Chicago, it was a very upsetting time, and he explained to us eventually, he was just odd. He was really acting quite odd. And he said, my identity is as a New Zealander, and one of the things I've always been so proud of is that we haven't had terrorism in New Zealand. And overnight, his identity changed because he now was a Kiwi originally from that country. And that was when I really grasped more about how identity changes when, you know, you're living overseas, and how every minute of every day, as soon as you open your mouth, someone's likely to say to you, where are you from? So you're justifying where you come from all the time. I go down to the local shop and nobody asks me that because I sound like everybody else. And it was those experiences that made me realize, because it really brought it home. This is my son. I kind of know this guy, you know. It's all very well to read it on a blog or read it on a Facebook page, but when it's really close to home like that, that impacted me, and I learned something. And that was when I realized that what I learned, most distance parents and most distance grandparents weren't aware of it. And that's what I thought, there's this big gap in our thinking, in the way that we're processing this. And that's, you know, helped me to make the decision to write the book. So yes, those are the things that learned me. And I think I'm a pretty good distant parent and a pretty good distance grandparent. Nobody complains, you know. I read the book, I do what I've said, you know, and so we have a good relationship with all our kids. And, you know, we're a blended family. There's lots of pretty kind of weird things there, you know, but, you know, my stepchildren are only 10 years younger than me. My husband is older than 10 years than me. So we have a pretty mixed bag. So there could have been a whole lot of trouble there. But over the years, we've really worked hard at it. And I think that this whole process has helped me, because they know I've written the book, you know. They haven't all read it, to be honest, but they know I've done it. And that they don't try and be the expert about any aspects of distance family. They know that if I suggest something or like to critique something, I'm probably right. So yeah, I don't know. It's I have learned, and I just learned a lot by reading from everybody else. You know, I have a big library here of books. I'm a #1 fan of most mobility writers. So I get them all and I read them all, and so that I feel I can have that perspective. So that I've learned an awful lot about there. Yeah. And I'm continually learning. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. One question I was, when you were just talking, it struck me, you said, I'm a good parent and grandparent. And is there a difference in being a distant grandparent and being a distant parent?
A distance grandparent, a distance parent. Well, definitely. I mean, I always say, you are more, we are more of a parent. Once a parent, always a parent. And when I wake up in the morning, I don't think about how my grandkids are. I think about how my kids are. So the first thing I do is I come downstairs and I check my phone that there are no texts overnight, because if there was something really urgent, they know to text before email or ring or whatever. And, you know, because of the time zones. So the first thing in my mind is, how are my kids?
Yeah.
They're fine. Then I think about the kids, the grandkids, but you know, the grandkids are going about their lives. We're just this person back here. You know, we have this relationship, but I mean, we have to think back to when we were grandchildren ourselves. How much did we think about our grandparents? I mean, if yours lived with you all the time, that's different. But if they were in another town and you were 6 or 7, did you think about them very much? I didn't. You know, so I have to remember, you know, how was it when I was a kid? Well, you know, they were people that came and went. But our relationship with them is a far bigger deal to us than it is the other way around for most of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Of course, you're closer to your children than your grandchildren in a way.
Yes.
Although,
yeah. Oh, definitely.
Sorry?
Definitely.
Definitely. Yeah.
Mm.
Although everybody always says, and I've noticed this many times, that becoming a grandparent changes you and changes your relationship with your own children as well. Yeah.
Yes, it does. Sometimes they've been a bit more distant. They've gone off and done their own thing, and you know, and it changes it for them, because they suddenly go, whoa, you know, there's this bundle that needs help, you know, to be cared for 24/7, and they start to have an appreciation of how it was for you in your day.
Yeah.
So there's a sort of a mutual appreciation of each other's situations now. You know, you're maturing, we're learning, we're growing, we're becoming wiser as adults, aren't we, with these experiences. But then when someone becomes a grandparent for the first time, wow, they can totally reinvent themselves and quite surprise everybody and leave the corporate world and go off and move countries, move towns to be closer to this child because they're 60 something and they've decided, hey, life's too short, I want to be near these children. So strange things happen, you know, that quite surprise people.
Would you say, and I'm also going back to what Judith said, actually, that one of the most important messages in your book is this kind of empathy, creating this empathy, understanding the other's perspective, right?
Yes.
Understanding, as Judith said, understanding the perspectives that your parents have as grandparents. And you see them as grandparents, which is different from seeing them as parent,
Yes.
right? I don't know, Judith, if I translate your idea a little bit, that all of a sudden you realize that your parents also have a different kind of, well, you see them as grandparents to your son, and not only as your parents. You understand them better in a way.
Yeah, I think it's very important. And what is just come back to my mind all the time, it's like when my mother told me that I can give you roots and wings. So you're free to go, and then you have your roots all the time, and that it will remain. And that was so obvious for me. But I didn't realize that it doesn't mean that she's happy to have a daughter far away.
Mm. Mm.
So I think that's changing the perspective that I
Right.
knew what she thinks about that, but I didn't acknowledge the fact that she can still have emotion, and it doesn't mean that it's easy to handle, but she's
Mhm.
accepting that. So
Mm.
that's the big change.
An eye opener to you. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I have another question, Helen, that you mentioned that you're a good distance grandparent and you are a good distance parent. You feel that. What do you think? How can those be supported who wants to become a good distance parent or a good distance grandparent? Can we support them in any way? And if yes, how?
Well, I guess it's, how do you define a good? You know, I guess if there's no trouble at mill, as they'd say, you know, if everybody's kind of happy and communicating, then that's a pretty good situation. But things that I think your generation can help is, the word I would use is intentionality. You know, that the connecting with the parents and the grandparents is not something that's sort of haphazardly done, but it's what your family does, and we do it, and we make sure it happens, and we block it in the calendar, and we remember, and we, you know, post the presents in time, and we don't forget Mother's Day or Father's Day, even though it's a different date in that country. You know, those are the, you're on time. You say, you know, we're going to chat at 6 o'clock on Sunday night. Work backwards, make it happen. You know, yeah, there's always things that go wrong, but you know, I guess the message that I can pass on is that a lot of grandparents worry that they're going to not have a good relationship with their grandchildren and their children overseas. But one thing that my research has taught me, and I heard it over and over again, it was so exciting to hear, where distance parents and grandparents would say to me, the closest family relationships that I have are with the ones that are furthest away. Now, the reason for that is because the ones who live on the other side of the world, they are intentional about what they do, and they make it happen, and they're disciplined, and this is what our family does. You know, it's a mantra. And I've seen that over again, you know, and honestly, it is the furthest away. That my grandparents that I met who have children in Germany, the German family, you know, connect the most. They hear from them the most. Or when they do, they're really present. It doesn't mean that the ones locally aren't great. It's just there's a special kind of bond because they're making a really big effort and lots of one-on-one things. So yes, that, you know, you do have a huge power, and you can have a great relationship, and there's an awful lot that you can do, and it's all about, it's in the diaries, in the calendar, you know, this is what we're doing, you know, figure out that if Father's Day is the first weekend in September in New Zealand, you're posting your card when you're on holiday in July to make sure it gets there. And are you really, you know, are most people thinking about that when they're going on their vacation in the Northern Hemisphere summer? No. But if you want that to arrive, you're posting it then, because these are things, I've got a bit of a thing about Mother's Day and Father's Day, because I think the middle generation kind of aren't really too fussed about it. But we sit back here and the shops are full of Father's Day and Mother's Day, and we know our friends are all being treated or taking out to the cafe or whatever, and we just wake up and nothing happens, you know, and that takes planning.
Yeah.
You know, the day that a Father's Day or Mother's Day card arrives on time or early, kudos to those kids. You know, they go to the top of the class as far as I'm concerned, because that took planning. They even had to buy the card at a different time of the year. They had to buy it when it was Father's Day or Mother's Day in the country that they're in. And it's tiny little things. Those tiny little things will earn you, I don't know if you have the term brownie points. Is that something that is, I don't know if that's just a New Zealand thing, earn you a lot of brownie points. You can make a lot of mistakes, we get those things right, gee whiz, you're in the good books. You know, so the things that work, that are really effective, are very small. Not expensive presents, not lavish flowers that have cost a fortune to be posted or something, you know, just little things, little letters, a card that arrives on time because you worked backwards in your calendar and posted it in time, and didn't go, oh, it's mum's birthday next week, I'll quickly send a card and it arrives 3 weeks after the day, you know. Yeah, it's not rocket science, you know.
It's planning. Yeah.
Be a booker, book things, plan things, work backwards, and allow for things to go wrong. And yeah.
Okay, Artie.
Yeah. Thanks. So you've talked about to create empathy, right? I mean, that's one of your, it's one of the premises of the book. So have you been able to do that? You know, what's the feedback, or what's the sense that people who read your book, you know, do they feel more empathetic, more understanding of the issues on both sides? And if so, I'm just curious, I mean, what would be, you know, 2 things that they would take from your book, you know, that have been like aha moments, or, you know, learnings or insights in order to be more empathetic, or, you know, what have they just done differently? Yeah.
Yes, I'll give you a couple examples. First of all, I'll never forget the moment a grandparent friend of mine, her children are in the States, and she read my book, and I have a section in the book where I talk to them about their language, their style of language, what language do they use? And I talk about the level 1 is harmful, when they say things like, how dare you take my grandchildren to the other side of the world? What's wrong with this country? You know, do we not have a say in your decision? That's harmful. And then there's the human response of, I miss you so much, and I can feel the distance, and I just want to be there and give you a hug. I wish you'd come home. When are you going to come home? That's the human level, H for human. And then there's H for helpful, which is where they're saying, you know, this is your decision. I respect your choice. I'm proud of you, and I'll keep loving and supporting you. So I had a grandmother read that, and she sent me a message. She said, Helen, I needed to read that. So she always sits at level 2. She would always be saying, oh, I miss you so much, and I wish you could come home. And she realized that although that was a very human response, and it's absolutely okay to say that, just say it to your friends. Don't say it to the kids, because you're just loading them with a whole lot of guilt and drama they just don't need. So, you know, she was becoming empathetic to their situation. And then there was another distance daughter, the middle generation. I remember she said to me, because I write in my book about time zones and, you know, having a, you know, phone calls that are all set up in the diary and you know what's going to happen. And then to talk about the random calls that just sort of happen when they might ring and hope that you're there because they're having a quiet moment and they're going to give it a go. So right now, for my little grandchildren in the States, if they ring randomly, it will happen sometime in my morning. So I explain in the book that I work from home, you know, I've always worked from home. So I can write in my calendar, I will never go to the hairdresser in the morning. I don't book appointments in the morning. I do all that stuff in the afternoon. If I'm going out, I go out in the afternoon, because you never know, I might get a phone call. So why would I want to be out in the car and then, you know, have all that concern about driving and mobile phones and all that sort of stuff? Because then you're just adding another layer of complication to any attempt to have a phone call. So I just quietly, well, not even secretly, that's just what I do. And so I change it. So I always arrange so I remember a distance daughter reading that and going, I had no idea that people did that. And she reflected on it and thought, actually, you know, her own mother would do that. And I remember when the same daughter lived in Bangkok, it was the other way around. You know, I would go out in the morning because they were behind us, and then I'd do all the messages in the morning, I'd do the hairdresser in the morning, all that kind of stuff, and then I would always try and be home in the afternoon. So those are little things, but they're big things because they happen every single day. They're part of our routine. So I feel that, you know, it's the little practical things. We can't tweak the big things. We can't bring you home or us go there all the time. We can't do that, but we can tweak little things just a little bit. And so she was empathetic to, you know, or the daughter, the daughter was empathetic to her parents. Yeah.
Thank you.
When I hear this, Helen, I'm surprised actually that you would sacrifice your mornings in a way, stay at home, your mornings, and how far do you go? I mean, is it necessary? Is it limiting yourself?
No.
Is it, well, from an outsider's point of view, it might look like that, you know, it's like every grandmother who would be local, who would have to do babysit like every morning.
Yes. Oh no, but the thing is, I'm at home anyway, you know, so I've worked from home most of my life, and you know, like lockdown is no different in my world. You know, we were in this big lockdown. My days are totally no different from any other day. But if I had to go out in the morning, you know, if I had to, you know, go for an appointment, or, you know, we'd absolutely run out of milk and I need to go to the supermarket, I would go. I'm not kind of controlled or anything, but it just seems silly to be rung at the hairdresser when you've got tinfoil all over your head. You know, like that seems stupid, you know, like I can make the appointment in the afternoon. So, yeah, it absolutely doesn't control my life. But if I've got choices, I'll just be smart about it. Yeah. I hope I don't sound like a, a control freak.
And if we have time, one more thing that what about age and you know, when you're getting older as a grandparent, etc., does it become more stressful if the grandchildren are away and you know that there isn't much time left in a way? What's the experience?
Definitely. I mean, first of all, I think COVID we're going to find that COVID has made a lot of grandparents who were in a plane a couple of years ago have lost their mojo, and they're going to be really hesitant to travel. We can't quite see it all yet, but give it another year and I think you'll see a pattern like that. But the thing about getting older as a distance parent / grandparent is not so much that about the relationships with the children, because often they're teenagers and they're heading out, you know, the grandkids are heading out into the world, and, you know, you've got to let them free. But it's about coping as an older person by yourself. And, you know, when I'm old, there's nobody here. I'm by myself, you know. So my own mother lives down the road, you know, she's 20 minutes down the road, and she's less able, and I'm now starting to have firsthand experience of, you know, a parent who's just really appreciates, you know, having somebody that can pick them up and drop them off somewhere if they're going to an appointment. And I'm thinking one day that'll be me. So I tell my distance grandparents friends here, don't be the banker mum and dad too much, because one day if you go to the supermarket or the doctor, you're going to have to take a taxi or an Uber if you've got yourself sorted out, and these things aren't cheap, and you're going to have to pay for a cleaning lady, or you're going to have to pay for help, things that maybe if you had children handy they might have helped you with. So just be a little bit careful how much you give away, because, you know, you're going to need that, and that is a very hard time for all generations. It's the toughest time for the distance children, the middle generation, when their parents, you know, get older and they're not quite sure what's happening at home, and should they get in a plane, should they not get in a plane, and you know, what are their siblings doing or not doing. And it's the hardest time for everybody. Yeah. So definitely you know, you're really thinking more about your own concerns at that point than you know, pining about the kids overseas, because you've probably been doing this for quite some time by the time you get to that old, you know. You're not a brand new distance parent or distance grandparent by the time you're getting that old. You've generally been doing it for quite some time, and you're in the groove and you've got used to it and you've accepted your lot. But the realities of your own situation can be a little bit scary and a little bit daunting. And I know that myself. Yeah.
On the other hand, our research shows that from the side of the expats, so your children who live in another country, etc., for example, that they, for them very often, family is very important. So they would move because of parents getting older, things like that, you know. So it's also the fact that in a way there's a kind of obligation on both sides, right? And there's a strong desire to help your parents, and the family becomes more important in a way. And we read a lot of literature that says that even expats, they will only do it if they know that they can get home if there is something that the parents would need, that the family would need, etc.
Definitely,
right?
yes. But you know, relocating and coming back home if they've been away for 20 or 30 years, not necessarily. No, not necessarily. No, I mean, some will, some won't. You know, they're very settled. You know, none of our 3 children would have any plans to come home.
That might be very different culturally, because I think I have some colleagues, you know, in Asia, where they would, and they do. And that's a very important point. Yeah, it's very important. That's why I have addressed in my book how really most of it is kind of Western focused, because I really understand the different attitudes, for example, with different Asian countries, where the respect for the parents is so entrenched. And it's not that my kids are disrespectful, it's just a different way of thinking, you know. Yeah. All right. Catherine, is there anything you would like to ask or add or comment on?
That was extremely interesting. Thank you. I could relate to many things that were shared.
Thank you.
I know I'm myself as an expatriate in Korea right now, so I could recognize in the questions and in the answers many situations here. And I just to follow the latest question, I hope the next book can talk also about the guilt feeling of parents towards both grandparents, their own parents, and their kids and the grandchildren. And I experienced many situations where people had to leave because of their parents being in difficulties or having died recently, and of thinking of going home because times became hard for their parents, for people from European cultures now. So this also happens. One thing I experienced here is that I also really believe in rituals. This helped me a lot. As a grandchild, as a parent, it's helped me a lot. But I discovered, and I think too late because I didn't do it at the beginning, that actually the expatriation can also add to the grandparents' world. For instance, we now use more the video to share what we see in a spontaneous manner. So unprepared, if the time is appropriate, we would share something we find really beautiful or really amazing with one of the grandparents. And actually this really adds to their world. And they're really, I think, we really feel, both sides feel quite happy and grateful about this,
Good.
that we can still do it. And I don't think we would have done it if it was not so special what we were experiencing here. And
Right.
if it was
Yes, yeah.
not so different and something we can only share once. And the video has tremendously changed this distance relationship. I did
Good.
expatriations before without the video with little kids, and now with video, and turning the video not only to the kid but to what the kids actually see and experience has been a great experience recently.
Mm.
You mean
It's
you
good.
make videos that you send to the grandparents?
Live. We just turn the camera not only to the kids
Okay.
but what they actually see, you know, through a road trip, or when we find there are many amazing places in Korea, obviously. So when we see something extremely beautiful, they do a lot of things with lights, landscapes, obviously, mountains, sea, and so on. Or there are not so many festivals anymore, but there are light festivals very often, things that you could never see elsewhere.
Yes.
Definitely not in France, where I come from. So sharing this is just so precious, and so, but this can only be done at certain times, obviously.
Exactly. But there is an app that you can do a video and send it like you would a text, can't you? There is an app that you could film something.
We use WhatsApp. We basically use video, calls, WhatsApp. We just turn the focus, that's all.
Yeah.
Yes, but there's another app, gosh, I wish I could remember the name of it, where you could record a film and send it, and as you would an email, and they'll just open it when they're ready. I'm not sure what it is, but that means at least if the time zone isn't you can send it. Yes. There's some great apps around. I have to confess, I have not devoted any of the book to the various apps. Like there's one called Marco Polo that you can read books to children and everything, but the reason is the technology keeps changing so quickly, and I figure if you've achieved that empathy and you're in that place of clarity in your thinking, you get creative and you find these things anyway. You don't need to read a book about it. So thank you, Catherine. I'm glad you got lots out of it.
I think, Catherine, it relates very much to what was said earlier, that you share more because there is something to show, and there are differences, and maybe you would not do that if they lived next to you, because then what's new? It's just the everyday life. But of course, if you travel or if you're in another country, there's something new for you and for your parents on the other side of the world, and you want to show. It's like sending postcards in the past, right? Showing what's there, and maybe because of that we share more. It's true. It's very true. Yeah. Thank you for that. All right, I think it's time to wrap up. Any final words, Judith?
I think that was very interesting, and thank you, Helen, to share all your experience and knowledge, and also your research with us. It's very helpful, and I think it's not only for this level, like the parent level, but really each generation can learn from the others. And it's something very important to highlight the fact that family is always coming first. And then we can do our job, our career, our travels, and all the rest. So thank you very much, Helen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for all your organization. You've been fantastic. She's super organized and really onto it, and I've really appreciated it. It's always nice to know what's happening, and I appreciate the opportunity. So thank you very much.
We don't know what the next book will be, but all these CITAR members will get the information as soon as we have
definitely
one.
Maybe
If you have an idea, any of you, please come up with an idea. And Artie, your next book, and Helen, your next book will be very welcome to this meeting of the book club. Thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of, good evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are. And thank you for joining us, Catherine. And all the best to everybody. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank
See
you very much.
Thank you.
We'll be sharing the book.